Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the stream and happy Friday. Obviously, not our normal setup. I probably look a little weird. I probably sound a little weird, but that's a-okay. I am in my parents' basement, live from the mountains of Colorado. I am here for a couple of reasons. I gave a speech yesterday to a very cool luncheon group called Ladies for Liberty here in Colorado, which was an incredible gathering of more than 150 young patriotic women in the West. And tonight I am delivering a speech at a local GOP fundraiser here in the Denver area. But the main reason I came home this week was to help facilitate some stuff with my family because, as you guys know, my grandmother passed away this last week. So it has definitely been a weird, out of the norm scheduling week. I apologize for not streaming yesterday. There was just a million moving parts going on personally with family stuff going on and everything else. But I am so happy to be back, so excited to be kicking off the weekend with you guys. And as of today, I am officially done with book tour related speaking engagements for this book, which is crazy. It's been a nonstop, like 6-7 week journey, bouncing back and forth across the country. I'm exhausted. I need a good nap, and I am fully ready to transition into all content and really pouring back into the stream and all of our other short form content on social media as well after a very successful nationwide book tour. So thank you guys all so much for your patience with all of that. I'm psyched to be back in the studio full time Monday through Friday, with the exception of my wedding happening at the end of June, but really from here until the end of the year, which I'm very joyful about. Today, we are streaming about something a little bit fun. There were a million doom and gloom, horrifying news pieces that we could have talked about on the stream today, and I decided, I think everybody is sick and tired of all of the crap going on in the world this week. So why don't we do something a little bit more fun? I don't know about you guys, but I have been obsessed with a new series that was adapted from a video game series called Fallout that recently hit Amazon Prime's streaming service, Prime Video. And it probably is the best television I have watched in months. Easily the best new series I've seen since HBO's adaptation of the video game The Last of Us. I'm sensing a pattern here with games becoming the best TV shows. We'll get into all of it, I promise. It totally blew me away and was one of the best series I maybe have ever seen in terms of artistic direction, storytelling, and just the overall writing of the show. I hope you guys have had a chance to watch it. If not, sorry, some spoilers coming. But I wanted to stream about this today because apparently there's been this huge backlash from conservatives, particularly conservative men, about how the show is wildly woke. Certainly was not my experience watching the series, and I doubt that it will be yours too when you have a chance to watch it if you guys haven't already. So we're gonna jump right in. But first, let's say hi to a couple of people. As we're getting started, do me a huge favor and smash that follow or subscribe button wherever you guys are watching. We have officially hit 50,000 subs on YouTube, which I am so grateful for. You guys know we have grown like astronomically, insanely on Instagram this year. We're approaching 1 million followers there, and it's been an interesting journey seeing how much longer the process takes on YouTube, but I'm so excited to be investing into this community more this year and to get all kinds of YouTube specific content out. So thank you guys so much for our growth on YouTube, and I'm just so grateful for all of our growth everywhere. As you guys are hitting smashing, I need another cup of coffee, that follow or subscribe button. Also, let us know who you are and where you're watching from in our chat, and we will say hi to a couple of people. Over on Rumble, we've got Omnifist Productions kicking things off, as well as Luke, I am your father, in the Rumble chat. We're going to talk about May the 4th at the end of the stream. Don't worry. I did not forget that, okay? Did you guys expect that little of me? Over on YouTube, Rob Hellfire says, Isabel talking about video games? Awesome. I've been getting the pressure from the people who help edit my YouTube videos and from my fiance to start posting some gaming content. Really, the only game that I have been like head over heels in love with is Hogwarts Legacy. So I'm gonna need to start getting more into the gaming world for sure. We've got Josh, Delane Thomas, Alex Starling, and Unforeseen Outdoors and more in our YouTube chat. Over on Locals, Alex is here, Magic Def is watching, Nitty Witty is here, and more. Alex says, please no spoilers on Fallout. I'm gonna do my best, Alex, because I know you're only on episode 3. Hopefully I shouldn't reveal too much. And we've got our whole community watching over on Getter as well. Thank you guys all so much for being here and for helping to grow the stream one day at a time. Okay, so in case you're just totally unfamiliar with like everything that I'm talking about right now and you've lived under a rock, and you have no idea what the Fallout series even is, let alone why people think that it's some woke, horrible garbage television. Spoiler, it's not, and we're gonna prove that wrong today. I clipped the trailer for you guys to take a look at, and just watch this trailer, and then try to tell me that this is gonna be bad television, okay? This is peak television, if I've ever seen it.
Hello there. I'm here to show you a wonderful place. A veritable Camelot of the nuclear age. Not made by God Almighty, but the working man.
You can be a hero by purchasing a residence in a Vault-Tec vault today. Because if the worst should happen tomorrow, the world is going to need you to build a better day after.
Okay, can I just say really quick, when I first watched this trailer and saw the series, there's no way, there is no freaking way that the Santa Monica Pier would still have the Ferris wheel standing after nuclear warfare. Just had to point that out. Just had to point that out. It's fine. Everything's fine.
The mission of the vaults should be important to everyone. To come up to the surface one day and restart civilization. Can you tell me what's happened in the last 200 years?
Holy shit. You're an actual vault dweller.
I am.
I thought all you dipshits were dead.
What you're doing is insane.
I don't set the world.
It isn't like the vault out there. It's big.
Higher. I just want to start.
I've had a rough week. Practically every person I've met up here has tried to kill me.
I'm simply going to harvest your organs.
You
You need to go home. You come from a world of rules, of laws. You should not be alone.
Why did you join the Brotherhood?
To hurt the people who hurt me?
People are going to come after you.
Ain't much stage cleanup here, Volty. Well, now that is a very small drop in a very, very large bucket of drugs. You look out at this wasteland, looks like chaos, but there's always somebody behind the wheel.
Everyone wants to save the world. They disagree on how.
There you are, you little killer.
Peak. It's so funny. It's interesting rewatching that trailer for the first time after knowing how the series ends. You see things, you pick up on things that you wouldn't necessarily have noticed at the beginning. So that's fascinating. But without giving away too much, in case you guys aren't finished with the series or you haven't watched it, in case that wasn't immediately obvious from the trailer, the general premise of the show is post-nuclear warfare fallout, nuclear fallout, of the United States of America 200 years after the nukes all basically destroyed civilization on the surface. And there's an entire population of people that are living underground in vaults where they are essentially waiting it out until it's safe to go up on the surface and repopulate the United States of America. The protagonist character of the series, her name is Lucy McLean. She is awesome, like the definition of a true badass. Has to navigate this experience of leaving her vault and figuring out what's going on in the outside world after no one, allegedly, has left these vaults for the last 200 plus years. So she, as a citizen of Vault 33, has to go figure out what's going on the surface and try to mend the gap between the vault people and everybody else. Before I get into any of the content of the series and why I think it is overwhelmingly one of the best TV shows I've watched in a very long time, a bunch of you guys are already putting this in our chat as well, but I said at the beginning of the stream, in terms of artistic direction, I am blown away how well done this series was. It captures this sense of nostalgia and futurism all at exactly the same time that really hasn't been reminiscent in a series to me since the very beginning of Stranger Things, which captured like the 1980s vibe with a futuristic vibe very, very, very well, thanks to Netflix's series Stranger Things. The adaptation here with Fallout is a little bit different. They capture like a 1950s going into the early 1960s nostalgic sheen on everything that they do. So they capture mostly 1950s and 1960s music in the series, which is very cool as the score, and everybody dresses like it's the 50s. The TV sets and the furniture and the cars look like it's the 50s and 60s, but it's set hundreds of years into the future, which is fascinating. And I thought that was a really interesting artistic direction of the show, because when the nuclear bombs go off to essentially destroy civilization, it's supposed to be set in the year 2077. But upon first glance, it looks like you're watching an old film from the 1950s in like old Hollywood. And I think that the directors made that choice to make the old times before the war, before nuclear fallout, as what we typically would associate with nostalgia in the United States today. Everybody likes to look at the 1950s as like the golden era of America, but it was fascinating to watch this 1950s era vibe, style, music, clothing, fashion, etc. be set in a futuristic era. And it got me thinking, by the time we get to 2077, is that going to be like the in vogue fashion? Because right now in the 2020s, we're bringing back everything from the 1990s, 1970s, 1980s, and we're mixing it all together in our young adult years. I just looked at a picture, because I'm at my parents' house, of my parents on their wedding anniversary, or on their honeymoon, just after their wedding 30 years ago in Australia. And I laughed because the outfits that they were wearing honestly look like they could be outfits that anybody my age is wearing today. So maybe the futuristic 1950s thing is going to come back, but either way, just the nostalgic aspect I thought was very artistically well done. And it was apocalyptic, but also nostalgic, and like looking into the future and the past all at exactly the same time. So I loved that aspect of the show. The characters were so well played. The casting was absolutely incredible. Overall, I just thought the series itself blew me out of the water, and I clearly was not the only person who felt that way and felt that the series was wildly successful. As you saw from the trailer, it hit streaming services on Amazon Prime, who hosts the series, on April 11th, and within the first 2 weeks of the series being available, it nabbed more than 65 million viewers. It was the highest viewed Amazon original piece of content since the Lord of the Rings show, The Rings of Power, which embarrassingly, even as a Lord of the Rings fan, I still have yet to see, but I heard it was cheeks. So I don't really want to watch it, but it's fascinating that so many people are viewing this series. And I kept saying to my fiance Brock, as we watched all of the episodes of the first season, I think there's 8 throughout this last week, by the time it was over, I said, you know, there were parts of that series that felt very Stranger Things oriented. It felt very The Last of Us oriented. It felt oriented towards the Hunger Games, which also had a bit of a renaissance this last year because of the Hunger Games prequel movie, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which was so well done, by the way, totally exceeded all of my expectations. And it got me thinking about this theme of apocalyptic literature, television, movies, entertainment, video games, etc., and why we seem to be so obsessed with the apocalyptic nature of things. We're going to come back to that because I definitely want your guys' opinion on why apocalypse-driven shows and nuclear fallout or the government has fallen or whatever seems to be the vibe of what everybody is gravitating towards naturally for our favorite TV shows and movies and video games today. But first, I just want to address all of the people who think that Fallout was some sort of woke piece of garbage, apparently. A bunch of people came forward right before the series hit streaming services, just based on their viewership of the trailer, I guess, people who've been playing the games for a very, very, very long time, claiming that the series adaptation from Amazon was going to be woke. Yahoo Lifestyle wrote about this on April 10th, and they called them Fallout critics who were angered, calling the series woke garbage over a single detail in the series. And what is that single detail that made people think this was going to be a woke garbage show? The fact that the main character of the series is a woman, is named Lucy McLean instead of being a man as the main character of a nuclear apocalyptic series. And I haven't played the Fallout video games as of yet, so maybe some of you guys who have played the games can shed some light on this for me, but apparently they were all angry because typically you play the series as a man, but everybody else was responding to this criticism saying that you've always had the choice to play the game as a female protagonist character. So apparently that's what was making everybody so upset. Lucy, the main character, is pictured right here in the series. One person commented on an Instagram post promoting the show, "OMG, the sheer wokeness has me triggered!" Exclamation points everywhere. Somebody else on that same Instagram post said, "Hopefully this doesn't turn into woke out instead of fallout." Somebody else said, "Probably going to be woke garbage, and this bullshit better not be canon or they've killed the franchise." Another person said, "If this is woke, I'm gonna be pissed." Why they were all saying that it is woke is apparently because the main character is a female. The woman who plays Lucy, her name is Ella Purnell. She is a pretty liberal individual, and I'm sure I don't actually agree with her on the vast, vast majority of things. But here's what she had to say in a follow-up interview back at the beginning of April about all of this backlash, and I thought this was fascinating and very well said. She confronted the unfounded criticism surrounding the political narrative of both the game and TV show, asserting Fallout is an inherently political game, emphasizing the game's deep societal analysis. She affirmed the show's commitment to this essence, insisting on maintaining a political narrative akin to the game itself. "I really like the mirror it holds up to society, and I really like the comedy. They've managed to nail the tone of the game so well and blend this into the mix of comedy and drama. Humans have this way of finding humor and comedy as a coping mechanism to deal with quite heavy topics. It's what I do, at least, when I'm talking about something heavy. I just throw a couple of jokes in there." Regarding the other criticisms, she commended the show's decision to feature a female lead. Although it would seem fitting for writers to center the Fallout TV series around a female protagonist, the show has regrettably encountered an unjustified backlash. Purnell expressed her admiration, saying, "I love seeing women in survival dramas and seeing women sort of explore the depths and extent of what they're capable of in desperation, really getting into the nitty-gritty of what survival means. You're starving, you're desperate, you're exhausted, you're not in this together, a pretty picture that films originally depicted women as." She pointed out that only recently have women been shown to explore the same emotional depths as men, adding, "Seeing women to be violent and gory and not shy away from having to make really brutal decisions, anything that's smart and I suppose political in a way, and I think Fallout hits on all of those points." I totally agree with that perspective, and I have a really hard time understanding why having a female protagonist in the series versus a male protagonist is the only predicating feature as to why Fallout would be woke out or be this overwhelmingly woke series based on the gender of the main character. By the way, a binary gender, that's a pretty big win in TV in 2024, rather than the actual substance of the series. But it got me also thinking again to those other apocalyptic series that we absolutely love, that our society eats up. The Hunger Games, female apocalyptic protagonist. Stranger Things, female apocalyptic protagonist. The Last of Us, arguably could be Joel, but Ellie, female apocalyptic protagonist. And none of those shows, with the exception of one episode of The Last of Us, have ever gotten the same backlash as being automatically woke just because they were made with a female protagonist. So I remember seeing a lot of those headlines right when the show was coming out and was wondering if it was worth it to watch. Should I even give it a try? I was so disappointed in the live action adaptation remake of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I made it through like one episode and I just couldn't do it anymore because that actually was woke garbage. But I had seen enough clips on TikTok of Fallout to warrant, okay, I'll give it a try at the very least, and totally fell in love with the series. If you have any sort of objection to having a female lead, but you like The Hunger Games, you like Stranger Things, you like The Last of Us, you will absolutely fall in love with Fallout. Lucy is anything but woke in any sense of the word in this series. She's adventurous, she's honest, she tells the truth even when that's difficult. She's not afraid to stand up for herself and to defend the people that she loves, and she's not afraid to ask the hard questions rather than just going along with the mainstream narrative. That's what actually woke would have looked like in this series. But she, to me, is the perfect embodiment of what actual femininity and what true feminism, like strong womanhood, is supposed to look like in the worst of scenarios. As to what she said about the political nature of the show in that interview, it's fascinating to explore this a little bit deeper and a deeper level into what they're referring to there. If you have not finished the show, might be a good time to go get a cup of coffee, but basically the entire premise from day one of the series is that the United States of America is at war with the Reds, with the communists who are imminently about to engage in nuclear warfare with the United States of America. And all we know about this entire experience is that the Reds nuked America 200 years ago. It sent the world spinning into chaos and spiraling, and obviously nuclear fallout, which allegedly destroyed the vast majority of civilization at that time and forevermore. I'm not going to spoil. I really want to spoil because we have a lot to talk about, but I know a lot of you guys haven't finished the series quite yet. But generally speaking, the narrative throughout the show is that commies bad, America good, and is that really true, and how do we negotiate with all of that? So even that in and of itself is kind of fascinating to wrap your head around. But without giving too much away, you find out very, very quickly the influence and the power of the most powerful corporations and companies in the United States of America to push certain policies and certainly to capitalize on the end of the world, to capitalize on the apocalypse, namely with Vault Tech, the company that is responsible for building the vaults underground and selling them as places that people can live after nuclear fallout eventually ends up happening. Vault Tech ends up becoming easily the most powerful company on the face of the planet. They admit that they are far more powerful than the United States government. And I think a lot of people at a surface level look at this series and the video game franchise as a criticism of capitalism for that very reason, because it was a company that ended up creating so much demise, and it's these powerful CEOs and these powerful corporations that are taking over society. But that truly is anything but actual free market capitalism. Interestingly, I felt like our current society relates intimately with what this series is trying to tell you, that not capitalism, but we call it capitalism in bed with the government, where powerful companies are controlling the government and vice versa. When that ends up happening and a very small number of elite, powerful, wealthy people control all of society, that's when you start to get into very dangerous territory. For us, obviously, we aren't facing imminent nuclear warfare with the Reds, although I guess we kind of are as we approach World War III, which is insane to think about. We don't have a Vault Tech building underground vaults and advertising to sell them to people, but we do have a very small handful of extremely powerful companies, corporations, and CEOs that are just as, if not more powerful than presidents and prime ministers of countries in the Western world. And those people are conglomerating their influence and power together to essentially control every aspect of society in what we traditionally would call crony capitalism. There were several scenes watching Fallout that felt oddly familiar to me with the rise of groups like the World Economic Forum, with Klaus Schwab, or the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, with the George Soroses of the world, who are doing absolutely everything they can in our actual reality, not seeing something through a screen, to pull every single puppet string in society to control your life. The "you will own nothing and be happy" narrative felt very interwoven throughout this series. And I think it's a really shallow argument to look at Fallout as a criticism of capitalism. In fact, it's actual free market capitalism, not crony capitalism, that would have prevented bad situations like this from happening in the series and in our real world, where honestly, there's not a lot of distinguishable difference between the government and people like Klaus Schwab and Mark Zuckerberg and the very, very powerful people in the world trying to take away your most basic liberties. If anything, this series, from a political narrative to me, showed the power of individuals and communities, not the government and not powerful crony capitalism corporations or CEOs, in rallying to fight for liberty and freedom, breaking free of the approved mainstream narrative of the indoctrination and propaganda that people have been fed for hundreds and hundreds of years. At this point, it's like 2,200 in the series, and discovering the truth for themselves. It was a fascinating cultural commentary watching this series and understanding that there is a potential future in which this is what America could look like. Maybe not with Vault Tech and all of the other fake companies, although I do think they mention a couple of real companies in the series, who own everything, who own the means of production for everything, who are in bed with the government and control the politicians. That could be a very realistic problem that the United States of America and other Western countries are facing in the imminent near future if we continue to cede power to the most powerful people on earth, to these elitists that are trying to take away absolutely everything from you in the name of safety, in the name of protecting you, in the name of providing for you, which eerily was exactly the same messaging as Vault Tech, the evil company in this series, because they are going to keep you safe. They are going to keep you alive. They are going to give you a fighting chance in the threat of nuclear fallout, in the threat of nuclear warfare, that, it turns out, trying not to spoil, they have a very clear vested financial interest in incentivizing, is including more warfare around the world. It blew my mind. So this show easily captures the tone of what we are living through more than anything I've experienced in a long time. The same way that I think The Last of Us and the series adaptation, even more than the game, captured the cultural moment and the cultural temperature around government interference with pandemics when it came out just after we were all regaining normalcy for the COVID-19 pandemic and how the government responded to that. But it really has gotten me thinking over the last couple of days, as I mentioned, how much people are loving, attached to, binging over and over and over again apocalyptic narratives, be it in literature, video games, television, movies, etc., dating really all the way back to George Orwell's 1984, which I desperately need a reread of after TikTok has been banned, and now with this new confusing hate speech bill that just passed the United States Congress. I'm trying to do more research on it before we talk about it on the stream, so have no fear, we will talk about it, but I need to do a full read of the bill first. And I'm noticing this pattern with young people, with Gen Z especially, in the last 10 years, really since we've been teenagers, in this same narrative being resurrected in modern entertainment. Obviously, you see this in The Hunger Games. That's the whole premise of The Hunger Games, is a futuristic, post-apocalyptic United States of America where the government has taken over literally everything in society. You see this in Star Wars and even the modern adaptations of Star Wars, where it's a post-apocalyptic like empire takeover or the First Order takeover of everything in society. We saw this in The Last of Us in a post-pandemic apocalyptic takeover of society with a loosely regulated and organized government that was essentially a weaponized FEMA or a weaponized CDC. They call it FEDRA, that eliminated individual liberty in the name of safety. You see this in Stranger Things with the government trying to cover up all of these insane conspiracy theories and kids being the ones to continue fighting back against it. And I love this continued image of the young hero or heroine being willing to stand up and fight for liberty when everyone older than them is either participating in the facade, in the propaganda, or is too afraid and too scared to do anything about it. But it begs the question, why are we so obsessed with apocalyptic narratives? Even WALL-E, you guys are putting WALL-E as an example right now in the live chat. So freaking true. I love WALL-E, and we even love that series because of its post-apocalyptic nature. So this is probably the most common recurring story and recurring theme storyboard that's basically the same elements just mashed together with a few different characters, a different setting, and a different timeline over and over and over again. And I don't know the answer to that per se. I'd be really curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. But generally speaking, I think my initial hypothesis of this is that we are obsessed with apocalyptic narratives because it kind of always feels like we are on the edge of that ourselves. When the news cycle, when everything about politics, when our culture, when international conflict always constantly feels like the next bomb is going to go off, always constantly feels like nuclear warfare is imminent, always constantly feels like World War III is going to show up tomorrow, which I have felt more pressure of personally, and maybe it's because I talk about it every day as a creator, in the last 6 months than I ever have in my entire lifetime. And I think more people feel that way for sure. When we constantly feel that in our real lives, I think there's a sense of comfort and understanding when we see this in a fictional setting as well. We recognize something familiar in these stories of the Hunger Games, of Star Wars, of The Last of Us, of Stranger Things, of Fallout, because there are recognizable elements to these stories. 1984 is perhaps the most recognizable story around the world today, particularly the Western world, because we can recognize concepts like groupthink or the Ministry of Truth altering historical facts to try to fit in with modern culture and modern society. You recognize concepts like the Ministry of Love actually being the ministry that promotes war and conflict around the world in the name of safety and in the name of compassion and love. You watch this sense of self-censorship in 1984, and I think we love this because it feels relatable. It feels like something we are living through today, even though this was written decades and decades and decades ago, ironically, as a warning, not as an instruction manual, but as a stark warning for what society could become if we don't continue to fight for freedom every single day. The Last of Us felt so familiar to people, as I mentioned, because we were coming out of the government complete overreaction to the COVID-19 pandemic and the immediate overnight loss of our most basic liberties and freedoms to move around, to freely shop, to assemble with our families and our loved ones, to go to school, to have a job, to go to church on Sunday, all because of protecting you from a global pandemic that wasn't very severe as an illness, but The Last of Us was almost like, had the illness been bad, this might have been what everything looked like in the United States, this weaponized version of the CDC and FEMA and complete pockets of the United States instead of a wholehearted government that we know and love today as the 50 United States of America. And I think Fallout in particular did so well this April and is so relatable to us because with everything going on in our current events space today, particularly on the edge of something like potentially World War III that's been imminent for a very long time at this point, it feels relatable. In the last year, I've had more conversations with my fiance, my friends, my parents about, God forbid, what if, da 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 da, what if China XYZ, what if Russia XYZ, what if Iran XYZ, and some of those what ifs have come to fruition, especially in the wake of the conflict happening in the Middle East in these last several months. But what if we actually engaged in some sort of nuclear conflict? What if the world spiraled out of control? What if the World Economic Forum became so wildly powerful that they actually overtook a lot of these governance structures and we had a one world government, not through elected officials, but through powerful CEOs and powerful corporations? This show really got me thinking about what's happening in real time, and it sounds like you guys have a similar thought about all of it. Nitty Witty says, perhaps post-apocalyptic fiction is so popular because with so much going on in current events, it really feels like we are at risk of heading toward an apocalypse. Oof. I hope not. I hope we're not in an apocalypse, but it does constantly feel that way, right? I mean, especially with how the media is portraying everything, with how our politicians address things in their speeches, on how social media algorithms are playing up a lot of this insanity every single day. You guys are suggesting other shows and other stories like this. Resident Evil, Songbird. I saw somebody say Ender's Game. Oh my gosh, I haven't heard that title in a long time. I read Ender's Game in middle school, and that book is really, really good. Doomsday is a movie. Well said. King of the Hill. Guys, you guys have good suggestions. Very good suggestions. And really, I think all of this comes down to what Unforeseen Outdoors just dropped in the chat and why I think people are gravitating towards these stories so much. Fear sells. Fear sells. And so when our media, when our entertainment, when our education system, when social media companies know they can keep your eyes glued to something for a very, very, very long time, they know how to capitalize on that and how to continue making revenue from it. And largely, that fear today is based on reality, but often feels so artificially inflated that they're almost trying to get us to buy into the imminent threat of the apocalypse, right? I said 2 days ago on the stream when we were talking about everything related to these college campus encampments, how much of a misrepresentation a lot of this has been in the media. There aren't 19 million college students, which is the current population of college students in America, taking to the streets of their campus and setting up tents to protest for Gaza. There are maybe a few dozen people on a handful of the 3,800 college campuses around the country who are doing so, but even the vast majority of them are not current college students. Meanwhile, what I am seeing from current college students isn't being covered in the mainstream media. You're watching a group of frat bros hold up the American flag at UNC Chapel Hill, which was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And they've now had a GoFundMe raise over $516,000 around the country in support of this group of young men who are continuing to just stand up and do the right thing. It's not going to get mainstream media coverage, but it was a simple act of courage in the face of insanity. Then yesterday at Ole Miss, for example, there was a tiny brand new encampment of people trying to set up the latest Palestine encampment on college campuses of maybe, and this would be a stretch, a dozen people on campus in Mississippi, surrounded in a ring by at least 1,000 students, 18 to 22-year-olds, who were laughing and chanting. They were posting funny memes about the situation, and all loudly singing together the national anthem of the United States of America. Like, GTFO, get off our campus, you do not speak for us. And that will never get the type of media attention that the fear of the actual encampments themselves will get, particularly in the mainstream media that, like a lot of these companies in Fallout, are kind of in bed with the government and have substantial propaganda-style influence over society. That's what I've really been taking away from this series. It was hilarious. It was so well artistically shot. The costumes, the script, the dialogue, the score, everything about this series was like peak television. But the takeaway from all of it was that it really still is just television. Like, all of these stories have continued to exist over and over and over again, really dating back to George Orwell's 1984. It seems more familiar today, it seems more intimate today, but they really are just stories, and we still have the capacity to fight back to prevent things like that from happening. And I don't think fighting back really has to look like rocket science, to be totally honest with you. I think sometimes it's in the simple nature of turning off your screens, of taking an unplugged day, tuning out all of the insane, divisive, propagandized voices in your life, and enjoying the simple things. I'm home in Colorado, as I mentioned. I'm giving a couple of speeches for the very, very end of my book tour. My grandmother's funeral is tomorrow. And I've been trying to organize a few wedding things while I'm here in Colorado because I have a wedding coming up in 57 days. I live in Florida now, but our wedding is here in Colorado. So I've like had a bunch of decorations and everything shipped here. And as part of my homework while I was here to get ready for my wedding, I was sifting through bins and bins and bins of old printed photographs before we had mountains of iCloud storage, when we just had printed photographs when I was little, believe it or not, still a real thing, because we're putting together a slideshow of my fiance when he's young and me when I'm young to play at our welcome party the night before our wedding. And I was sifting through all of these pictures, and I came across a ton of my childhood growing up in the mountains in Colorado and in Idaho for a few years. And there were several of my sisters and I playing on playgrounds. There were tons of us hiking through the woods. There was my first ski lesson when I was like this big on skis and couldn't even walk. And I just had the biggest smile on my face over and over and over again in every single one of these photos. And it dawned on me that we are so miserable and we are so scared and we are so divided today because we are constantly tuning into this apocalyptic style narrative that the world really is going to end like tomorrow. And there's nothing you can do about it. All of these series are predictive programming for what's going to happen. You can't control the future. You can't control your own destiny. You certainly can't control the destiny of your country and world at large. And looking at these pictures of exploring the wilderness and having fun outside and just being a kid again, it kind of all clicked in my head that it was Christ who commanded, not even suggested, but commanded that we be like the little children. He was meaning that largely in the context of our faith and approaching faith with a childlike wonder and awe. But I think we can apply that childlike wonder and discovery and inherent foundational joy that isn't constantly rocked by the changing nature of current events to everything that we're dealing with in this constant apocalyptic doom and gloom society that we're living in too. There is power and influence and massive societal change in being willing to turn off your phone and computer and go sit outside and notice the flowers that are coming up in the spring and a bird singing outside and going to spend time in nature. There is power in impacting your dating lives, in turning off the constant negativity of everything is terrible and you'll never get married, and being willing to put yourself out there, meet someone in person, go on a date, be courageous enough to fall in love. There is power in the joy of having a family and connecting with your siblings, your cousins, and having children of your own. There is a massive pendulum shifting and swinging in the United States of America today, even especially on these college campuses in the face of these encampments, with the simple joy of singing the national anthem back towards these radical, insane protesters literally calling for death to America. And I think it starts with reabsorbing, reclaiming, and recommitting to a childlike wonder in how the world works today. We can constantly focus on the negative doom and gloom. Everything is doomed. Our country is already gone. It's not worth fighting for. Or we can reorient to say life is beautiful. Freedom is beautiful. Faith is beautiful. How can I inspire other people to live their life in that exact same way? Go watch Fallout, because genuinely it was so good, rocked my mind on how to think about all of this stuff moving forward, and was easily the best TV that I've watched in months and months and months. And then, when you're done binge watching those 8 episodes, which is my current homework to you, my next assignment is to turn your phone, your TV, your computer off this weekend. Spend some time with your loved ones, reconnect with the great outdoors, and think about what you're most grateful for and how you can share that with others in the next conversation that you have. That's it for a short stream today. I hope you guys loved this series as much as I did, and kudos to Amazon for making an actually not woke series of our time. That was so good to watch. I pray and hope there's a season 2. They set it up really well at the end for a season 2, so fingers crossed for all of that. I am off to Denver to give a speech this evening and then back to the East Coast over the weekend. So we are back in the studio all week next week. I'm so excited about being back full-time with all of our content. The travel has been so fun on the book tour, but truly we have got to get back to the stream. So you guys have spoken. We are responding. We will be back Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern for a whole lot more truth telling. Happy weekend. Love you guys so much.